George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. We got a sister that we feel good about. Dr. Juhanna Rogers is the Vice President of Social Equity, Racial Equity and Social Impact at Center State CEO and the host, executive producer of Behind the Woman. And breaking news, not breaking news, but they got season 3 coming up. So it's not breaking news, but if y'all know, they've had 2 great seasons on WCNY, PBS 24 in Syracuse and online at WCNY.org. Really excited to talk to Juhanna. And, when I called Juhanna, I said, I'm doing a wrap up and I want to talk to some people who I feel are making an impact and making a difference in this community. And so I said, Juhanna, I need you on the list because it's been a minute since we talked.
It has been a minute. Yeah.
It's been a minute. So let's talk about the success of Behind the Woman and what that success has meant for you, and also what you've learned and culled from doing that show.
Yeah, that's a great question, George. When I think about the success of Behind the Woman, I mean, even that question, I'm just like, I put my head down a little bit because I really don't know truly what to say. It's gotten to the place where it's really taken on a life of its own. Right. And I'm empowered by that because even with this past season 2, there were so many pieces of it that is happening and it's out there in the world. And it's almost like your kids, right? Like you planted the seed, you watered it a little bit, and now it's growing. Right. And so I think the success of it is that it's still becoming, right? What's really excited about it is that I'm seeing it be a part of people's lives in a very, very different way, right? And there's crew members at WCNY I walked into this season, and young, ambitious, media-based, young, career-minded young people that were like, we're glad we got to work on this show. Right. And they're behind the cameras and they're making the decisions about, edits or, angles and things that, I had the idea and I had a vision, but those technical details, we needed it to come together in order to make it for television. And there's a diverse set of young people, Black Cub and others that are behind that and are part of something that's touching the lives of folks here in Central New York. So, I feel like, maybe it's graduated from kindergarten, maybe now it's graduating from middle school, and it's going into another year of development, right? And so I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about, and also how you take a show from an idea and to a production, and you talk about the impact that it's having. So what was your original vision for the show?
I was hoping that the show was going to be kind of like Gold Cast. If you scroll Facebook, you see, or Eric Thomas, these short video clips that leave people inspired. That's what I thought it was going to be. And my goal was it was going to help people get to know me from a more creative content creation, artist, scholar-based individual and hire me to come and do work at their schools or in their communities in some way, do a keynote speaker or something. And that was really it, for my personal takeaway. But the driving passion behind like putting the resources into it came from recognizing that this community needed, some different models of leadership, more diverse women out there and in front. And I think that goal has become more important than anything, right? It became less about me and more about who the women are that have an opportunity to tell their story and look at the opportunities that are coming to them as a result of having the show as a platform. Oh my God.
You say it's not about you, but it is, right? Because you have to execute that vision and tell those stories.
Yeah. I think it's important we tell those stories. I think that somewhere down the line, this show will be a blueprint. And years from now, hopefully, it'll be some young woman or male, saw the show. It inspired them to take a career on, and the next generation of Syracuse leaders are coming into this space and place because of what this show and many other things that are happening around this community is happening, and they see themselves in that here, right? It's like that one teacher maybe you had that really poured into you, that made all the difference. Sometimes it's hard to find that in some communities. And so I'm hoping, maybe the show might be that for somebody.
Talking with Juhanna Rogers, Dr. Juhanna Rogers, who is the executive producer for the Behind the Women third season coming up on WCNY. And Juhanna, as I listen to you, it's hard not to say that you got a lot of things going on, right? Because all of this creative piece, I mean, you're writing, you're part of, is it the Great Eight? Is that from Indiana? All right, from Indiana University, all of 8 Black women who received their PhDs all at the same time. And of course, we just saw you recently. Well, number one, you still perform as an artist and also as a vice president in corporate America. So that's sort of, it's kind of like how you manage, and you're a mom.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And yep.
All right, here's the cliche. Do you feel like Superwoman?
No, I don't. Even this morning, before we got together, I'm gonna give you a total honest Juhanna Rogers madness. There's some business documents that I needed, and I'm like, I don't know where they are. I don't know where I put them. I'm going through emails. I'm calling folks I worked with 2 years ago. Like, do you have a copy of it? Because there's so much going on. And what I've really had to lean into is that, Juhanna, you can't be involved in a lot and have all these things together, right? And so you have to try to put the brakes on so you can take care of you. I'm really trying to focus on doing a better job of that for myself. But also realizing and being vulnerable that some of my stuff is in complete chaos, right? And so as I'm keeping in stride with some things, there's definitely other things that that fall apart. So that keeps me balanced, right? I don't necessarily feel like Superwoman, but I do know that I'm in a very blessed place. Have a lot of opportunities, and I'm trying to do my due diligence with being appreciative of them, humble about them, and hoping that the opportunities that have been bestowed upon me, I'm doing my due diligence and paying that forward and bringing folks with me.
How do you feel, or the question I have is, why do you think these opportunities are coming to you? Because you are everywhere, doing a lot of things, and I'm interested in that because you're also now at a point where you have to make some choices and you have to say no to some things. And I'm thinking that, how do you contextualize that for the sister out there listening, or even to the brother that's out there listening, who is confronted with all of these different opportunities, and then you have to be really specific about how you edit.
So about opportunities. Yeah, great question. One, I'm a Jersey girl, right? Specifically from the bricks, as they say, but from Newark. And I was just talking with a friend of mine this morning actually about there is this certain level of grind and hustle that is really baked into me, that is a part of the environment that I grew up in, right? My parents, my grandparents, all worked multiple jobs, all was focused on trying to establish multiple streams of income, because at the time in which they were coming up, that's what they had to do to try to be able to afford or work ourselves out of poverty, right? And so I think part of it is not like in a, I'm trying to say it in the most humble way, right? Part of it is my survival skills, right? I'm not in a place because my family is not in a place, or my friends are not in a place where, we can be satisfied, right? Because, I'm a first generation college student, right? And so that means that everyone, out of my household, my brother did go on to get his degree later, right? But we're still coming out of, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Those structural barriers to poverty. And now I have doctor in front of my name. Yes. And I love my job and I'm doing work and people see that as success. But if the folks that are also in my family and connected to me are still working their way up out, then all that happens is that level of burden or responsibility is then placed, not in a significant way, but you want your people to be okay. Right. And so my go ethic isn't necessarily because I maybe want to do all these things, but I have to figure out some ways if I want my son to have it a little bit easier, or if I want to be able to help my parents be okay when they are retired. My mom reminds me there's no trust fund coming. So,
right.
You know what I mean? So
this is a very important point. This is, my Vicky Brackens, who, I do
I know,
the financial.
that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Right. And this is what she talks about. How do we get out of the zero no more so that we can begin to pass on wealth legacy to our children? Because many of us are constantly having to start from zero, right? And so and that's a challenge, right? Because it wasn't in your family, right? Legacy. And so you're actually creating it for your generation. And right, go ahead.
Right. And the thing that I try to talk about with like some of my friends who I see are also, in the same position or doing similar types of I won't even call it work, but they have similar strategies. Is like we have to figure out a way to move ourselves forward. That requires sacrifice, and so to others that might be listening, that might be considering, that could resonate, or maybe even thinking about, right? Like having those multiple streams are important. Being able to manage them effectively, is important. But also that sacrifice that it requires. I will say to folks, I've had some great opportunities in my life, but let me be very clear. For my 20s, I wasn't doing the girl strips. I didn't, have a robust social life, right? I was in school, in the books, I was mothering, right? And so my son lives in Delaware. Currently, he's doing high school there and doing athletics, and he's doing great. But when he moved there full time, that created the space for me to think about, okay, well, what you gonna do, Johanna? Right? And so for those whose kids have left, or you may not have any children, but you have this space in your life, I've had to make very conscious decisions to stay focused, to take advantage of performing in the show, take advantage of working on a project that could get me out there and hopefully give me more opportunities to bring an income in. Because even if you don't want, your family's not there, if you have student loan debt,
Okay.
you're gonna have to do something. And I have quite a bit of it, right? And so if I wanna buy a house or do those kind of things, it's not gonna come from just working one job. That's what my granddaddy told me anyway.
Multiple streams of income, right? That's what
Multiple
he
streams of
and
income.
and so I'm hearing you say that the opportunities are coming because you're out here on your grind.
I'm out here on my
Partly because
grind.
I have to, but partly
It's
because
not,
that's what I know, right?
right. I would much rather be like, oh, I'm Juhanna and I'm fun and I'm social and let's go out for drinks and let's hang out after work. I would
Right.
love to be able to do that. But they listen, okay, we got till January and they're gonna be like, that PhD is nice. These loan repayments are back. You know what I mean?
Right. And right.
And if you want to, and this is a issue for many, there's a lot of us that have gone out, gotten graduate degrees and things of that nature, and we're finding, but to be ordered to do the things that even our parents did, like buy a house or do those types of things, it requires you to do more than just your job.
Yeah. And so bringing it around to the work that you do, you also want to have an impact. And I'm thinking, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about, is this the way you on this hustle and this grind? The only word that's coming to my mind is, how does this impact you as a Black woman? That's the word I would use. Yeah.
Well, it's on so many levels because how does it impact me as a Black woman? I think sometimes it's expected,
right,
for me to be doing all these things, right? Sometimes maybe I'm working harder because folks sometimes will think that artists or creatives want to work for free. Right?
I know, right?
Right. They always ask me to do something, and I'm like, creative processes and projects take resources, as we're seeing right now in the pandemic, right? When all these artists are out of work, the impact that has. I was lucky enough to just finish the show with Symphoria. I know you were there, George.
Yes.
And that was a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, a whole cultural experience I had never been a part of. It's not my orchestra, but I was like, Lord, Pam Murchison and Circulation, they done gave me an orchestra. That was a wonderful experience that as a Black girl from Newark, okay?
Right.
I never had before. I've never even been to a symphony, but it was wonderful. And the thing that I said about that experience, it was number one, I often write creative works because I'm 6'3". I have locks, and there aren't many plays or parts that are written for someone that phenotypically looks like me.
You're 6'3" without heels.
I'm 6'3" without my heels, right? And my feet are large, so I like to wear heels because I feel like they just disguise.
Right.
But that was the first time I played a character that wasn't based on what I look like and who I am as far as my racial and gendered identity. And I didn't even think about that as I was going through the process, but going back and people talking about and folks saying, we didn't know you were going to be a part of it. And I was like, well, I was kind of shy because I'd never done something like this before, so I didn't talk about it a whole lot. But looking back at the pictures and the process, and here I am with these amazing artists, I was like, I've never had the opportunity to just be a character, right? But that opportunity, anyway, my point was, I got to meet a lot of the other circus performers. Many of them have been out of work for 2 years. This was their first gig.
Yeah. Right? The show was called Nutcracker with a Twist.
Nutcracker Twist, yes.
Yeah.
And shout out to Josh and Sora, Circulation, who put the show together. And they intentionally pulled in New York artists that were part of circus culture to be a part of the show. And, I met people from all over, and they haven't been performing in 2 years. So you think about, like, how are they surviving? Right. And so when it comes to that artistic part of me and being driven, part of my work in that space is about equity around women and gender too. Our stories are not, we want our stories to tell, but in order to tell our stories, investing us creating them in an equitable way, right? And we know historically Black women as well as Black men are, our art has been taken away, commodified. We've given birth to a lot of American culture that we don't reap the benefits from, and so I think that those are all the ways that this work impacts me as a Black woman.
Yeah, and I know we're talking with Dr. Juhanna Rogers. Juhanna is an artist. She's the host and executive producer of Behind the Woman, but also the vice president for racial impact and I always get racial equity and social impact. I'm gonna get that right one time for Center State CEO, which is the regional economic development engine, if you will, that includes 12 counties in the area. And receives funding to do a lot of the work, and also includes the business membership, quote, Chamber of Commerce as well. And so I want to get to that in a minute, but I still want to talk about you and as a woman in this work and in this community. And I know your finale show, right, was about was really like women at the top of their game. And so what are the sisters talking about right now at the level that you're at that level? Like, what are the issues right now?
Well, funny enough, I'm writing a book right now. That's one of the things I'm doing. I'm taking some time. If you're not seeing me around socializing as much, I'm a artisan, visiting artist at the Stone Quarry Art Park, and that opportunity has given me the a space to just write. And so I'm spending a lot of the time writing and reflecting on what are the women talking about. I call it right now, past the glass ceiling, right? Like those moments of being like, okay, you doing it, girl. And it's like the person that's doing, even me, including myself, is like, oh my gosh, there's days of imposter syndrome. There's days where you're trying to find community in that space, and you might be the one and only. And so finding community can be a challenge. You got to be very intentional about trying to find a network and strategy. How are we working together to advocate, support, help bring along other women of color? And that takes a lot of energy. That takes a lot of fortitude, and it takes a lot of courage and guts. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. If you are a person that's my mom would often say, or my grandmother's too, you come from a village.
Yeah.
And your role is to give back to that village. And so I'm constantly thinking, like, how can, even if I'm doing well, how am I connecting to the village? How am I supporting it? And even in the spaces, for example, the women that were on the finale, Angela Lee, Melanie Littlejohn, Evelyn Ingram, right? It's like, they're all talking about, like, we are doing this work, we're going to be okay, but how are we, setting up the next generation, right? And how do we empower the next generation to say that this is hard and we can't, we can't do it for you, but we want to make sure we are pushing against the structures that have prevented more of us from being here and doing the work. And so, just even thinking about it is.
Well, what I think about, Juhanna, as you're speaking, it's something like this, whereas because you're visible in those spaces, then you become the only one that everybody knows to do everything. And, let's ask Johanna, and that can be taxing as well, because you want to represent so that the community has a voice or a particular voice. and then at the same time, there's only you right now, right? And so I get that it is a challenge to create a space where others can walk in, and that, because when you think about it, okay, how many years did it take you to get to where you were, and the other women you talk about, and where's the bullpen, and to use a baseball term, right? Where's the bench, and to use a sports analogy, where's the bench? How are we preparing? What spaces are we creating that the next generation can even get an opportunity to sit in the room and be in the glass ceiling? And then, and is my voice enough? Do I have enough power to make that happen? Are those some of the things that you are thinking about?
Yeah, all the time. And so when we look at the work within Center State, right? Because I do that a lot, and that's where we're having a lot of those conversations, not just internally, but also with companies, right? Is this, we have an initiative called Generation Next, that's all about, getting more diverse professionals across industry structures together. And before obviously COVID, how do we construct spaces to bring them into, or to provide that could help them build the network, but not only for them to build the network, but for the larger business community to also get to know this network, right? Like, they're dynamic professionals, young people, brilliant minds in this community. I've met in the past 5 years that I've been here, many of them, right? And so the Generation Next initiative, you see a component of that in the Tech and Culture series that Marcus Webb and the Economic Inclusion team is leading around diversifying tech. And Liza Simade is involved in that work as well, right? Like, there's those strategies, but Generation Next is also just a general banner of that work and how we identifying, engaging talent. I also believe that we have to create spaces and provide experiences for young people to be exposed to the work. So like you said, they see what's possible, right? And so if it's working with On Point, and getting interns in there, or Mercy Works and those programs, trying to provide the spaces for young people to be exposed to what's happening, even if it's through a short engagement, to give them line of sight into what's happening, are just some of the things that I've been doing in my role, I won't say this role, but my various roles at Center State in some way, shape, and form.
Creating that opportunity and creating that space. Juhanna, so you're on the road. I'm talking to you on the road, actually in your hometown in Jersey. And as I think about where we're headed, this is winter as we're having this conversation, and the winter solstice and the time of reflection and reclamation. And what does that mean to you?
Oh, goodness. Courage. It's meaning courage to me. It's meaning clarity. It is meaning getting my affairs in order. And I think me being, having this conversation with you, thinking about Syracuse, but being in Jersey right now, I know that Syracuse has a variety of spaces and places where people are willing to support your entrepreneurial development. Center State is one of those places. Michelle Brooks Rowlands, executive director of UMIA, SSIC, WISE.
All right, so hold on. Let me just give all those acronyms. Upstate Marne Economic Alliance, the Southside Innovation Center.
Yes.
And then the
WISE.
next one was women. I forgot what the women's. I forgot what
Yeah, I don't know what the ISE stands for,
I
but
don't
it's a
either.
it's a
But
women's based entrepreneurial support
yes, yes, yes,
organization.
yes.
Um, you know, uh, in a very small concentrated area,
Right.
right? A variety of resources, and so those who are listening, who are inspired,
Mm-hmm.
the economic inclusion team again at Center State CEO with the work that Cal Quarters is doing on the South Side, Jonathan Link Logan, some of his work, um, Andy Obernesser, the work he's leading. Uh, there are a lot of resources in this community to help individuals
Right.
get started. And even as I sit in my hometown of New Jersey for the holidays right now, it's like, I don't know that it would have been as easy for me to do what I'm doing here
Uh-huh.
because of the size, because of a whole lot of variable factors.
Right. Right.
But I see in Syracuse, even during the pandemic, when I look at what Tamika Barnett's doing, when I look at what Yolanda's doing with Cocoa Candles, when I look at the Reeds and Access Dental, I'm just like, even in the midst of probably one of the darkest economic times in our country, where we are literally trying to keep each other alive in a very real way, we have brilliant Black and brown peoples that have continued to develop their dreams. And I think it is important for me to own and honestly say, I found the mentorship, the guidance, right? And was able to establish the relationships with critical people like yourself, like Vicki Brackens, like, Cal Quarters at Pathfinder, that really just helped me navigate how to even set Behind the Woman up in a way that it could thrive and flourish, right?
Right.
Auburn Public Theater, Gwen Weber McLeod, Joanne Yarrow at Syracuse Stage, Kyle Bass, people are here that are willing to open the door. And so I would say that I know that Syracuse, one is home, but also it is where I have become who I have dreamt about, right? Newark gave me that foundation. It's a black city, it's Black led. Most of the time it's Black.
It's blacker than black.
It's blacker than Black, right? And that gave me as a young person, along with being in a family of just entrepreneurs on both sides, it gave me that solid foundation of knowing who I am, right? Which is a privilege in and of itself, right? I had a stable foundation, but it's been Syracuse and the relationships that I fostered and the experiences that I've had, both good and bad, here that has helped me grow up and really dig deep and pursue my dreams.
You know what I'm hearing you say? And this goes back to something you said earlier about I'm just me doing what I do. And while it appears that I got it all together all the time, I gotta. She's shaking her head. She says, And if y'all can see this on the video, the video, you'll see it. It's a vigorous head shake. Those locks are moving all around. But I think so. In closing, I'm gonna say this, or ask you to just address this real quickly. And yet, even though I still, like, my stuff ain't where I want it to be, and yet I'm still doing what I have to do, or at least making the opportunities for myself, even as I try to get my stuff together, sometimes that is what holds people back from becoming fully who they are. So what would you say to someone who might be having a little imposter syndrome, meaning, and imposter syndrome simply means I'm not all I appear to be sometimes, and I feel like I don't measure up to what it is. But you also said this is where I found myself. So how do you navigate that piece of it where you're like, you know what, to somebody else, this is now advice 101. If that's you out there feeling like I've got to show up this way all the time and not be able to say, girl, that ain't really working for me, or do you realize I can't find this paper that I'm looking for?
Listen, and this is an important paper, okay? I'm not
Right,
gonna put all
right,
my
right,
business out here.
right,
This is
right,
an
right,
important
right.
paper. Shout out to admin on call, Eileen Collins, for being another one of those folks. Call and ask for help. I had a
Amen.
very traumatic experience that happened, and I really don't have it together. I will say, last year this time I was barely able to breathe. I was a very I had a very severe and intense intimate experience with COVID.
Mm.
I was hospitalized, and that just, and it took me about 2 months to get back. And I know, I recently, as I mentioned, did the show for Symphoria, and I couldn't remember my lines.
Mm.
And that's not generally something that happens, but the stage director gave me some advice. She was like, lean into that. Stop condemning yourself for what you're not able to do. It's the night before the show. Just lean into it. It'll be fine. Right. And I'm here beating myself up. I'm like, I don't know why I can't remember my lines. Maybe because there's a lot of new factors in this. We're doing it in a whole other way. It's something I've never done before. And I want to show up to the level of professionalism as these amazing artists around me, and I can't remember my lines. When she said that to me, lean into it. I had asked her to help me, and it was Gwen Weber McLeod who came over with Judy Dixon. Before COVID happened, I had this traumatic experience, and I needed some help just getting back into the groove of things. And they came over and they said, there's something powerful. You enable others when you see them as folks that can offer help to you. And so for those that are out there listening that may not feel like they're up to snuff, as they say, or you don't have what it takes, ask for some help from some trusted folks, right?
Yes.
And seek them out, because where you are is good enough. Nobody has it all the way together. I have to ask for help. That's a part of being a part of a team. You can't do it on your own, right? And once I'm able to say, like, I'm not very organized sometimes, I couldn't remember my lines, then you open yourself up to receiving something that can help you get over that loop. Right? Oprah has a whole team behind her.
Right?
She may show up just by herself, but please believe somebody doing her hair, putting the outfits together, somebody is editing the magazine. Gail is there. She called Tyler Perry to do this. She isn't necessarily doing it all, right? And so sometimes I think specifically as Black women, we come from such a traumatic space that we almost need to be that superwoman, right? And that's almost why when you ask, I'm like, no, I don't see myself as superwoman, because that idea of being a superwoman can be toxic.
Yes.
Nobody can do it all on their own.
And yet, at the same time, expected to perform in that manner.
Right. Now, I'm not. We are expected to perform. Now, that is correct.
Right. And you're right. At the same time, right? Yeah.
And so my simple advice, from a very, very, I'm living it. Ask for help. Ask for help. Again, recognizing that everybody is not interested in helping, but finding that village, finding your tribe, finding that close network of people that can help you level up. Because there is definitely, while you may be seeing, Johanna's doing this, Johanna's doing that, there is a contingency of people that I've spent time with that have sewn into me, that have motivated me, that has seen me broken or seen me questioning, from center state on down, that have said, Johanna, you can do this. Rob Simpson, you belong here, Johanna, you can do this work, right? And I think it would be a misrepresentation if I showed up today and said, you know, I'm doing all this on my own. And so in the spirit of winter solstice being renewed, coming into a new year, let's find our tribe. Let's network, build support, lift as we climb, and try to find ways to bring, if we can't bring the whole village, make sure we either going back and offering something to it or bringing some folks from it along with you.
Moving towards the light, coming out of the darkness, right?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Juhanna Rogers.
Yes.
And I just want to give a shout out to the Central New York Community Foundation for, I think you were one of the recipients.
We both were recipients.
Yes,
we both were recipients.
yes.
Thank you, Central New York Community Foundation.
Right. And I'm shouting them out because me doing this right here, right now, is because of them too, right? And I know they supported the show, and I always like when I know that somebody has been a recipient of their funding, I also want to give them a shout out in that moment because they support my show. So anyway, so that's good. Listen, Juhanna, I know it's been a minute. Thank you for the time you spent, and continue good work in your creative and artistic life in the book, but also in the work you're doing in the community as a vice president of racial impact. Oh, I did it again. Vice President of Racial Equity and Social Impact for Center State CEO, the Vice President of Racial Equity and Social Impact for Center State CEO. Listen, absolutely. Enjoy your time in the bricks, if you will, and in Newark.
Yes,
and do what you got to do, and wishing you continued success. Juhanna Rogers, somebody we feel good about, inspiration for the nation.
Thank you.